Okay, moving on to the last and final segment of today's show. I wanted to talk a little bit about a team that so far throughout the course of this college basketball regular season, I have spoken a lot about this team, but it's been a little while, and that team is John Calipari and his Kentucky Wildcats. And the Wildcats have been a team that has been in the news a lot so far this season, considering the expectations that a lot of us had and considering their struggles. Kentucky, throughout the non-conference portion of the season, was the biggest disappointment in college basketball. And I still think they should be probably considered the biggest disappointment in the sport. But I do think, after watching them up close and personal over the last couple games, Kentucky is finally starting to figure it out. And now the question I have is, now what? And I'll just do, once again, a quick recap. If you haven't been following Kentucky so far this whole season, I'll tell you everything that's been going down with BBN. So Kentucky brought in a freshman class with some loaded freshmen that most Kentucky fans thought eventually they're going to play in the NBA. Brandon Boston, Terrence Clark, Olivier Jackson, just some ballers on this Kentucky team. They're super athletic. And throughout the first couple games of the season, I think we all saw that these guys had not had a full preseason. They didn't have all of those bye games so they could gain confidence to beat up on your Central Connecticut State and your Hartfords of the world. I know Kentucky actually had a game that was postponed against Hartford, but Kentucky is a squad that they had some expectations, but to start off the season, they really were not playing well at all. However, as bad as they were playing, they did show once in a blue moon some moments that once in a while, considering the talent that's on this roster, would make you think, like, oh, wow, okay, maybe this is when it turns around and this is the game that we've been waiting to see from Kentucky. And it's happened a couple times this season, but so far, the momentum hasn't really been able to continue, and it hasn't really been able to stay within the basketball team. Tennessee, the win on Saturday, we'll see how that goes. But Kentucky earlier this season had a big-time home win against LSU. They had a big-time road win against Florida. And unfortunately, they weren't able to really build off of those big-time wins. However, they did get a nice win over Auburn. They did get a nice win over Vanderbilt, and I understand those two teams are nothing to hype home about. Those are two teams that are towards the bottom of the SEC right now. I totally understand that, but at the same time, Kentucky went into this game against Tennessee with some momentum, and even before this game against Tennessee, I remember saying to myself, I wouldn't be shocked if Kentucky won, because not only is Kentucky actually going to be ready to play, considering the fact that they should have beat Tennessee the first time, and all of a sudden, the Vols freshmen finally just started to show up, and Kentucky ended up taking the L, but when you look at the Wildcats, this was a game where a lot of people were waiting for, and this was a game where a lot of people were asking themselves going in, is Kentucky going to be able to take the momentum they built throughout the last week? Are they going to be able to take that momentum and build with it through this game against Tennessee? And they were able to do that, and Kentucky all of a sudden has won 3 games in a row, and I think we could actually start having the discussion for the first time in a while, has this Kentucky team all of a sudden finally turned a corner? And I think the reason why we could make that argument is a couple. Number one, as I mentioned, this is now Kentucky's second 3-game winning streak of the season. If you remember, they had one earlier in the season. They beat Mississippi State, they beat Vanderbilt, and they beat Florida, and then came back against Alabama and got the absolute beats. Let's see what they're going to be able to do following this game against Tennessee. Now, on Tuesday, their game against Texas A&M got postponed. Super unfortunate that ended up happening, because that would have been just another game where I think if you're Kentucky, you could have easily picked up another really nice opportunity to move the needle. They will then host Florida. That's a game you should win. I know you beat them already, but if you want to make the NCAA tournament, and if you want to go into the SEC tournament as the team to beat, that game against Florida at home on Saturday, the 27th, is going to be big. That is this Saturday, actually. And then they will head to Ole Miss to close the season. It is crazy that the last week of conference play for most of these Power 6 schools is going to be next week, because the season has really just flown by, but we are getting to crunch time. We are getting towards March, and we are getting very close to the SEC tournament. And Kentucky, in a very similar fashion to Duke, as I mentioned earlier, we know that from a pure talent perspective, they are a team that can make a deep run in this SEC tournament. And when you look at some of the teams in this SEC tournament that they're going to be competing with, I mean, Kentucky did beat Tennessee on the road. They did beat LSU. They did beat Florida on the road, and they were very close and competitive with the top two teams in the SEC right now in Arkansas and in Alabama. And I think that when you consider that, the fact that Kentucky finally going into this game against Florida, they have some momentum. They've won 3 games in a row, and you combine the fact that, think about it, in a normal season, Kentucky has time to gel. They have time to play with each other in camp and really get to gain chemistry from practicing with each other. This is also a Kentucky team that is able usually to gain confidence through beating your Central Connecticut States of the world and teams like that. And unfortunately, they didn't have that opportunity this year. And if you remember, even past Kentucky teams, a lot of people have been saying, Zach, why does this Kentucky team, compared to other Kentucky teams, just flat out suck? And it's funny because there have been plenty of past Kentucky teams that have been, at the end of the season, very successful. There are Kentucky teams that have made the Final Four, but earlier on in that regular season, it looked like the sky was falling and the fans were panicking. You remember last year, Kentucky lost to Evansville? You guys remember that game, right? What ended up happening? They lost the SEC. They won the SEC regular season title. And oh yeah, you guys remember last year when Kentucky went to Vegas and lost to Utah and also lost to Ohio State? John Calipari was able to rescue them from that when their heads were down. So I do think that John Calipari, this season has gone so bad then that it's kind of gotten to a point where it's like, okay, Kentucky's just irrelevant, they're out of the question. But I think this season has gotten so bad also where it's gotten to a point where we forget who exactly John Calipari is. And I remember hearing this last week that it's like at some point, it can't always be John Calipari's fault. At some point, Kentucky's players needed to just step up and make a shot. And over the last couple games, that is exactly what we've been seeing. I also think Keon Brooks, who had 14 rebounds on Saturday in the win against Tennessee, by the way, we're seeing him provide a nice body and a nice guy to provide extra depth. How about Davion Mintz and his game against Tennessee? This is a Kentucky team that is mostly led by freshmen, and once again, for what seems like to be the millionth time so far this season, when his team needed him the most, Davion Mintz was able to step up and make some big-time plays down the stretch. He finished with 15 points in the win over Tennessee. Jacob Toppin, he had 6 points, 8 rebounds, or 4 rebounds in total. He is what I think to be the unsung hero of this Kentucky team, because this was a kid that was supposed to be out here redshirting before the season started, and he's provided some big-time minutes for this University of Kentucky team. So I think when you look at the Wildcats and the way they've been playing, are they going to win the SEC tournament? I'm not sure, but do I feel better about their chances winning the SEC tournament right now and somehow, some way making it to the NCAA tournament than I did at any point this season before the start? Yeah, I actually think I would say that, because all of a sudden, during a Saturday where all the Blue Bloods were in action, we know these Blue Bloods have not been very good so far this season, right? When it comes to Kentucky, when it comes to Duke, when it comes to Michigan State, when it comes to Kansas even to an extent, when it comes to Indiana to an extent, when it comes to UCLA to an extent, we know how much these traditional Blue Bloods have really been struggling so far this season. And for the first time on Saturday, we saw Duke go out there and get a big-time W against Virginia. We saw Kentucky go out there and not only beat Tennessee, but maul Tennessee throughout the portion of that game. And I think when you look at the Wildcats, they are officially the team that when the SEC tournament comes around in a couple weeks, everyone is going to look at Kentucky and just say, wow, we have absolutely no interest in playing against those guys because they're just so hot. They have proven that they have the ability to beat really anyone in the country this season, or in the SEC so far this season, and that is a bad news for the rest of the league because we all know how talented Kentucky is. We all know when they play their best game, they are very dangerous, and finally you are seeing different guys contribute, and maybe even though it's just a win against the lonely Auburn Tigers and a win against Vanderbilt, who is the worst team in the SEC, this road win against Tennessee is not an easy win to get. And I know Tennessee isn't the best team in college basketball. As a matter of fact, I would put them right on top to be one of the more disappointing teams in college basketball. When you think about it, the Vols were a squad that many people, actually, including myself, predicted to have a very, very good season, and unfortunately their offense has just not been getting the job done. And when you look at the SEC standings right now, you have Alabama at first. They're standing at 13-1, but after that, there is no team with less than 3 losses. Arkansas and LSU are both 9-4. Florida is 7-5. Tennessee is 8-6. Missouri is 7-6. Ole Miss is 7-7, and then you have Kentucky at 7-7. Mississippi State still hanging around at 6-8, and then Georgia, Auburn, Carolina, A&M, and Vandy all pretty much out of that mix. But hey, Kentucky, everything's in front of them. They will host Florida and go to Ole Miss. If you could split those games and have some momentum heading into the SEC tournament, I think you will be looking very good there. And if the SEC tournament started today, Kentucky would be the 10th seed. They'd face Georgia in the first round. I think that's a game that they would win. They would be the 7th seed. The game against Georgia, I think that's a game they win. They would then take on LSU, then Arkansas, then Bama in a possible championship game if the bracket sets up like that. Can it happen? Who knows? Will it happen? Who knows? But hey, if you're a Kentucky fan, I'm telling you, I feel more confident now in your team's ability of possibly winning the SEC tournament than I have ever before.